this vanity cover. It's actually held on by these two fasteners that you can just use a flathead screwdriver to take off. So go ahead and pop that off. Next, we're going to take off these 10mm bolts on these coil packs, and then we're going to unplug the connectors by pushing down on the tab and just pulling up. You're going to unconnect all 6 coil packs. Actually, there's 3 more in the back since it's a V6. Alright, you guys, we're going to go ahead and take these off. And whatever I do to the front side with these coil packs, I'm going to be doing to the back. I might just not show that, we'll see. But it's going to be the same procedure for the back. So like I said, what I'm doing is I'm just using my 2 fingers and I'm pinching down on the connector and I'm just pulling up on it. Alright, so after you have the electrical connectors moved, you can pull out your coil packs. It is crucial that you know which coil packs went in which cylinder so you don't have a misfire. So what I've done is I have the numbers laid out on which coil pack came from where. Sometimes you have to twist it and it'll come out. So it looks like you have 2 tabs, one right here and one right here, that you just push a flathead screwdriver in and then you pry this up. Looks like it did lift off. I'm gonna go ahead and see what connectors I have to take off to get this harness off. So I'm going to start by disconnecting these 2 connectors right here and disconnect these 2 connectors as well. Jesus. There it goes. Alright, this one came off as well. So I'm going to go ahead and try and get these 2 connectors right here. There it goes. We got one. Yes, got it. So then we're going to take a 10mm and remove this bolt right here. I think it's holding on. It looks like a bracket, maybe an alternator bracket right there. So we can try and get this wiring harness off. Alright, that should be pretty loose. Now I can probably get it out by hand. So there's a little fastener right here. It's a little gray fastener that's holding on this wire loom. So I'm going to go ahead and try and use some pliers to push down on the fastener and just pull it out. Like that. There you go. So with that last fastener removed, this is actually pretty free, so you can access these 2 bracket bolts right here that we need to take off, that are going to be 10mm as well. They're on there pretty tight. Go ahead and get one of these off. So after you have removed these 2 bolts, this bracket will come free. I'm going to go ahead and put that to the side. So next we are going to remove this little bracket right here that's held on by these 2 10mm bolts that sits above the exhaust manifold. So I'm going to put these 2 bolts and this bracket to the side. So we are also going to disconnect the alternator wiring harness, which you move up that rubber piece right there and it's going to reveal a 13mm. Alright, so I got the nut off and then basically just wiggle this off right here until it frees, just like that. Alright, next I'm going to remove these 6 12mm bolts. 1, 2, 3, and then on the other side there's going to be 3 more. I'm going to go ahead and remove this hose from the 2 clamps right there, and then we're going to pull the strut bar out. Alright, so I'm just gently popping out the hose from the 2 clamps, holding it in. We're going to pull it forward, and then the strut bar should come free. So now that we have all that out of the way, we're going to remove these 10mm bolts along the edges. So now that that's all out of the way, what we're going to do next is remove these 10mm. So now that that's all out of the way, we're going to remove next these 10mm bolts and 2 10mm nuts. One right there, and the other one is right here. Use what you can, you guys. If you don't have a rubber mallet. Alright, so next we're going to loosen up this hose clamp right here and take off this hose on the left side of the manifold. Alright, so what I did was I pinched it with some needle nose pliers and I brought it down to here, so I'll be able to slide this off now. I'm going to try and get a flathead screwdriver, a small and slim one, just like this, and see if I can't pry it up. Let me see if I can't pry it off. There we go. Woo! Alright. So next we're going to go ahead and remove this hose right here. I think it's a brake booster hose. I'm not too sure. Alright, going to wiggle this clamp all the way down. Whew. Alright, so now that hose is free. So to get off the top of the intake manifold, I'm actually going to have to take this assembly off with it. I don't really want to mess with taking all this off, so it looks a little bit easier just to disconnect this. So what we're going to have to do is disconnect this black connector right here, and then I'm going to pull back this hose clamp just like I did with all the other hoses, and I'm going to remove this hose from the assembly so that the assembly and the top of the intake manifold, it'll come off together as one piece. We're going to remove this connector by, once again, pushing up on the tab and then just pulling outward. I'm going to go ahead and free that up. And then we're going to take off this hose clamp right here and remove this line. Yes! Got it, you guys. So now I'm going to remove all 14 10mm bolts that go around the perimeter of the top of the intake manifold. Next, we're going to remove the intake manifold mounting bolts. So you have 11 bolts. So there's 10 right here, and there's one all the way down there. And out of those 11 bolts, there are 2 different sizes. You have 12mm bolts and 10mm bolts. And one 12mm nut right here. After you get all 11 bolts out and this nut, it should lift free. Once again, take pictures. You have 2 different size bolts right here, so you're going to want to know what goes where. Alright, so I'm trying something different. I have used this little space between the throttle body and the intake manifold to put a pry bar, and I'm trying to like slowly like wedge it open to see if it pops open. I'm gonna go ahead and try this. I don't know if this is a suggested method, maybe not, but I don't have a rubber mallet, so this is pretty much as good as it's gonna get. Oh, fuck me. Back to where I was before when I was talking about the assembly attached to the intake manifold. If you look down here, so this bolt right here is what's holding on this assembly. So I think if I take off this 10mm bolt that I missed, the intake manifold should come off. So we're gonna go ahead and try that. This guy right here. We're gonna get this all cleaned up right here. I don't know if I explained this before, but since this is the V6, the intake manifold is actually sitting above the 2 valve covers. So what we're having to do is we're having to take off the intake manifold before we can get to the valve covers. But this is the bottom half of the intake manifold, so we're halfway there. So to get the bottom of the intake manifold off, I'm going to have to remove this 12mm nut and this 12mm bolt. So those 2 are going to have to come out to free this up. And then I'm going to have to remove the throttle body, which is held in by 4 bolts. It should be, I think it's 2 short bolts on top and then 2 long bolts on the bottom. And then I'm going to remove the intake tube. Don't worry, you guys, I'm going to clean all of this up. It's not going back in dirty. Also remove this crankcase ventilation line. I might honestly remove these. Okay. So I'm going to remove these 8mm bolts from my air box because I think it's going to make it easier to get my intake hose off. Alright, airbox broke free. Well, actually, we need to take the crankcase vent line out of the intake hose. So now we're going to remove the throttle body. This one, and there's 2 right beneath. So for the throttle body, you have 2 12mm nuts and 2 12mm bolts. So attached to the throttle body, you have these 2 hoses right here, and I'm about to take those off to remove the throttle body. I think they might be coolant hoses, so make sure if they do turn out to be coolant hoses that you have them sitting upright so that there's no coolant leaking out. I'm going to grab the hose clamps with some pliers and then pull it back. See if we can't work the hose off. Oh shit, yep, coolant. I do have the rag underneath ready for coolant. Of course, I will drop some. Alright, now I have those coolant lines removed. Alright, this is what it's looking like right now. Got my 2 coolant lines. My throttle body is removed. So you've got these 2 right here. They're the only thing that's holding on the bottom part of the intake manifold. A 12mm nut and a 12mm bolt right here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those 2. So I think the camera might have died, but I got the one 12mm nut off and the one 12mm bolt off. So we're going to try and lift this bottom of the intake manifold off and see what happens. Just wiggle it off. Holy fuck. Alright. So this is the bottom of the intake manifold right here. Starting to look pretty good. So after removing the intake manifold, we have front of the valve cover right here and then the back of the valve cover right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small break. I'm going to spray down the intake manifold and we're going to come back to this about an hour later and start working on it again. So to get this bracket off right here, it looks like you have one 10mm bolt right there, and then if you go all the way to the end, you have another 10mm bolt right here. So it is the same day. Don't mind the different shirt. Here are the 2 10mm bolts right here that we're holding in that bracket. I'm going to go ahead and remove these 3 connectors. Let me bring you over here so you can see what I'm talking about. So looking from the right side of the engine bay, you have this black connector right here, this green one, and then another black one in the back. So we're going to start with this black connector right here up front. Just push down on the tab and pull. This one came up. Alright, that one came off. And then the last one way back here. So we're going to go ahead and get this connector right here. So now you have 3 connectors off back there, all 3. Okay, so there's another bolt down here. And the bracket that holds down the power steering line with a little 10mm bolt, this is also going to have to come out. And here's the one 10mm power steering bracket bolt. So I'm going to go ahead and take off this bracket behind the back valve cover right here. So there is a 10mm bolt for this bracket, one right here. And then if you go down, the other one is going to be right here. Alright, I'm going to check and see what's holding on to it on this side. It might be that crankcase ventilation hose that I need to take off. So I removed this crankcase vent hose from the valve cover right there. Alright, so this is day 2 and this is how it's looking since I removed the intake manifold. Now we're going to go ahead and get our valve covers loose. We've got one valve cover right here and then the one in the back. The one in the front is held down by 5 10mm bolts. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts right there, and those are all going to be 10mm. These are the bolts that get really confusing. All the bolts on the valve cover are actually different sizes, and make sure you know where those are going before you remove them. And the back valve cover, you have 5 10mm bolts as well. You have 1, 2, 3, and then you move around to the back, 4, 5. So these are all 5 valve cover bolts from the front valve cover, and I have them tagged to where they were located on the valve cover. So this one's front left, front right, back left, back middle, and back right. So it makes it a lot easier to put them back. Whew, all right. Valve cover is off. All right, so right here is the valve cover gasket itself, and then we have 3 spark plug tube seals, and the other 3 are going to be on the other valve cover, but this is going to be basically what the other side will look like. So this is what my valve train looks like. It actually looks pretty good. I don't see really any sludge. It looks pretty clean in there. So next I'm going to loosen up the bolts for the rear valve cover. So I'm just cleaning where the valve cover gasket sits, and then I'm going to go ahead and wipe down where all this oil was actually dripping down. So what I'm going to go ahead and try and do is use a small flathead screwdriver and try and pry these up and get them out. Hopefully that'll work. We'll see. But I'm going to go ahead and start by taking off the valve cover gasket. So far we're looking okay. I have wedged a flathead screwdriver right between the wall and the seal, and it looks like I'm going to be able to pry that off. So now, since this is all cleaned up, all I have to do is install the seals and install the valve cover gaskets on both valve covers. So I actually just took the last 3 seals out of the freezer, and it really did help to put them in the freezer to help them shrink. And it's made it a lot easier on installation. Also, something to keep in mind, there is a wrong way and a right way to put in the seals. You want to go ahead and put in the seals with the lip side up, just like this. What I did to get them installed is I actually have a 4-inch C-clamp here that I'm using to push them in, and I'm using a 1 3/16 socket because it fits the spark plug tube seals perfectly, and I'm just using a rag so I don't scrape the underside of the valve cover right here, and I'm pushing them in. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the valve cover gaskets on both valve covers. Now there is a right and wrong way to put on the valve cover gasket as well as the seals. This is going to be the bottom part right here, and this is going to be the top. So it'll go in just like this. So you're going to want to have the flat side facing up and this side facing down. So I'm currently going to be scraping the old RTV that was on these corners right here. I don't know if you can see this little blob. And then I'm probably going to go over that with some alcohol. And I'm going to do this to all of the sides. And then we'll go ahead and add the RTV.